Hello and welcome to C-Suite Secrets. I'm Heather Parsons, your host, a serial entrepreneur, a fractional CFO, and a business value strategist. I've spent years juggling business and family life while helping entrepreneurs scale, optimize cash flow, and build real financial success. On our show, we bring you real conversations with founders, executives, and operators that are actually moving the needle in business. With that, let's dive right in. Today on C-Suite Secrets, I'm joined by Elena Czarnowski. Elena, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So glad to have you here. You are a lady who is working on a topic that I hold near and dear, which is kids and finance. So I am very excited about our conversation today. For folks who may not have had a chance to know you yet, I would love it if you would introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about how you got started.
Sure. So my name's Elena Czarnowski. I founded a company called Kid Laboratories. It was really a call to action. I had a professional career for about 15 years in technology before I became a mother. And then when I became a mom, I decided to stay home and raise my kids. Quickly, I realized I had a little extra time during nap time, and I started taking some online courses. I did have a robust understanding of the hardware and tech, but I started taking computer science, and that is when I fell in love with online learning. I decided I will have to teach my kids everything I learned. So when they got to be 5 or 6, I was introducing computer science courses. And then I decided that was also the time I should start talking about financial literacy. I kind of pawned the idea off to my friends and family, and they said, you know what, why don't you start put a group of us together and you can do this, in someone's garage over the summer. And so that summer I contacted the local community center and started teaching, the courses for a group of kids. After that kind of spread like wildfire. I started teaching at multiple community centers, hired people in all of San Diego and Southern California. And then 3 years ago, I offered virtual courses for kids and character development, goal setting, a course called Goal Getter, financial literacy, which is my course called Money Wise for students 11 to 14. And then just last year, I launched a course called the AI Workshop, teaching young students 11 to 14 all about the science behind AI.
I love it. And that's super important. As we work with entrepreneurs and business owners, I think I can't help but imagine what it would have been like for them to have gotten some of these financial literacy courses or just that exposure so early on. So I'd love it if you could tell me a little bit about what you've seen as these kids have grown. You've been doing this for a little while. So how's that been impactful for them and their families?
It's so fun to watch. And this is, just an anecdotal story. First teaching my son. So my son was in first grade. I think he was 6 or 7 years old. Really basic concept I would introduce. And I did write a book. It's called Future Proof Kids in 10 Minutes a Week. And all of my lessons I put together, and you can teach your kids in just 10 minutes a week. And so this is what I did with my oldest son. I sat on Monday afternoons. That's when he did not have any baseball practices. So Monday was easy. And for just 10 minutes, maybe he had some playtime after school, we sat down. And one of the first lessons I taught him was really something simple about needs and wants. I went on to teach a little bit more about the financial system and elevated the conversations. But a week after that initial lesson, just about needs and wants, we were standing in line at the local Starbucks. And I remember, we had an extra time waiting for the people in front of us. And I picked up a, overpriced coffee mug. And he literally pulled at my pants and said, "Mom, is that a need or a want?" And I just kind of giggled inside because here, I started doing these lessons just kind of out of fun. And it was really, he was really taking them on as his value center. So we'll cut to, 5 years later, I'm working with his younger brother. We're standing in line at another store. And so another lesson I teach in the MoneyWise course is a kind of a playful investment lesson, but I call it wanting to be wealthy versus richy, play on words.
Ooh,
And yeah,
I like it.
it's so great because I think it's very confusing for young people out there because there's so many new things with social media, and there's so much that you can see, and we've even experienced before social media, but now it's really in our face every day of what people really own and material goods and consumerism, and that's a real challenge. So having these intentional conversations early is extremely important. But another great outcome was I was standing in line again with my two sons at the time, and my youngest son was looking around at all the cool toys. We're, I think, in a toy store. And he goes, Mommy, I want to be rich. And we kind of giggled because I had already done the lesson, the value centered lesson to my older son, more important to have be wealthy and invested and learn to earn and save and budget and invest. And I hadn't done it with my younger son. And I looked over at my oldest son, Mateo, and I said, Oh, Mateo, does he want to be wealthy? And he goes, Levi, you don't want to be rich. You want to be wealthy. And he, at 9 years old, started giving him the lessons. Here's the difference. When you have earned money and then you invest it and have it create your passive income. So I just am delighted to see it, the repercussions so quickly for them to adopt these ideas. The other thing I noticed after teaching this for 3 years for older students, 11 to 14, is that we have this extra confidence, right? Financial literacy is really a coveted stepping stone to development for young people. Another anecdote from my son's, he was begging for a Gab watch, one of those watches where you can text your friends. And
Oh yeah.
we've kind of suspended, text. So I just keep telling him no. But, I wanted to have a conversation with my son. And so I said, why do you want this so bad? Just out of curiosity, because he kept pushing me for it. And he said to me, I want to feel like I'm growing up. Right. It was a measurement of development. And so all I have to say is financial literacy and being astute in money management is another lever for parents, instead of having over a cell phone, is to introduce them to these concepts. And that gives them this prowess and confidence in understanding things at just such a higher level that they actually are craving organically.
I love that. I think it's so smart to have these conversations early and often, like what you're talking about, and I see this in adults all the time too. It's that whenever you feel like you have your finances in order, there's a confidence attached to that, right?
I couldn't agree with you more.
So it's like, yes. So getting these kids to understand it early on, I think it is just a springboard for them naturally.
Mm-hmm.
And I also love how you're talking about this whole being wealthy versus rich in this consumerism society.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen things from houses over handbags where ladies are trying to say, okay, I'm going to buy an investment property rather than buy a Louis Vuitton bag. You know what I mean? Such a different level of investment and things that
Mm-hmm.
people are doing. And I think that is truly the difference in the definition of, okay, I choose to postpone gratification so that I can be wealthy later on. Not, doesn't mean your life is terrible and you never do anything and just eat beans and rice. But I think having that intentional plan is so important.
Oh, and it's so valuable. And I just read a study out of Stanford that your financial system is actually starts to develop, just to your point, as early as 7 years old, because it's correlated to delayed gratification. So it's simple things. I mean, I don't want to overwhelm people if they haven't started talking to their kids prior to 7, but it's simple things like, getting them to just practice, like flex that muscle of delaying, even if it's they want something now, just like, okay, we'll get that in a week. Or whenever my sons come to me for something, that they want to purchase, I say, okay, we'll put that on your birthday list. It's not this constant dopamine hit, even, yeah, and then we can afford it, right? They're not asking necessarily for large priced items, but flexing that muscle little by little and knowing that in saying no, or just that tiny bit of delay is giving them strength, I think is really valuable too for parents.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that I see that could be a barrier as they go into these conversations, some of this is their own baggage and skills that they need to learn as parents also. So I think it's really cool that we're getting that information out there because at the end of the day, this is our future. These are the next wave of entrepreneurs, and we want to make sure that we're combating that small business failure statistic. Having 80+% of small businesses that fail in the first 5 years is an astronomical statistic. And I think this goes a long way of helping to solve that problem. I would love your thoughts also on how this confidence that you're talking about also comes through with the STEM side of things that you're working on? I know financial literacy is important, but I would love it if you could tell me a little bit more about how you're integrating STEM with this as well. And then we can get into the fun part of AI also.
Okay. Right. Well, I do have a number. So I, had a degree in economics and mathematics, and I had a 15-year professional career at the hardware side of IBM and AMD, the CPU microchip company. And then I took a number of courses online for computer science. So we all know that tech is the force to be reckoned with. And so I just think digital literacy is the new literacy. And the way I explain this in my AA workshop to the young people, like, if you were to go to France today, right, they're going to speak French. If you're going to go to Spain, they're going to speak Spanish. But the global language that we all need to speak is tech, is digital literacy. So I am an advocate for learning early and having it just be commonplace. That's why, I created my book and workbook series, because I believe parents can have these conversations. And just to your point, given the right palatable way to share. In my book, I give a small description of how to have these conversations with your kids, as well as a QR code for video instruction to make it super easy, and then workbooks. But here's what I wanted to say. I just want to touch on the competence and confidence for parents to take ownership of these conversations with their kids. So I'm a woman of faith. And whenever, you're reading the Bible, we say you're in the Word. You're in the Word. And if you're in the Word, you're really living your life according to the values, right? This is the same way I feel with finance or computer science. If you are teaching your children, just like my son taught me, to have these delayed gratification, to have this value center over money, you're in the Word, you're in the financial Word. You are living, you're modeling that, because you've decided to have this proactive conversation. So learn together. I mean, there's every single resource out there online. I encourage people to learn together, and then it keeps you on track. It helps you to remember your value systems. If a fun lesson I like to do in my MoneyWise courses, have the students, they get to plan the entire summer vacation. They get to come up where they're going to go on vacation. They get to find the discount tickets. They get to, decide how they're going to pay and all these things. And having that one goal, say if you wanted to do this exercise with your kids, now you're all working together. So the next time, it's super fun. You're at the store, you wanted to spend a little here, a little there. You can remind, no, we have this like unified goal of, our Disneyland vacation or wherever you want to go. So I highly encourage parents, if they do have apprehension, to start small. Again, I'm going to say Future Proof Kids book is a really good tool, but there's tons of tools out there, and just make sure that, you're doing it together, because it will help your children for the rest of their lives, honestly. And it will also help you because you're consistently reminding yourself, no, this is important to me. No, this is important to me. We all need that little encouragement. I know I do.
Right. I love that. I couldn't agree more. And I think a lot of it, is around that being intentional. And now
Right.
you're in control of the conversation. These kids are not learning it at school, where, as we've all seen, Lord only knows what's going on there in some of these places. But you have a little bit of more control about what your kids are absorbing. And I think it also helps. I know one of the things that was a struggle for me whenever my girls were younger is being able to have some control over that technology, using it as a tool rather than the dopamine hit center that you're
Mhm.
talking about. And I think that's tough for parents. So, do you have any advice on how they could, change how kids are interacting with tech to remain digitally literate, right? But not just use it as a tool that they sit on day in and day out to get that dopamine hit.
So, what I find fascinating at early, again, it starts at 7, but I think 9 would be more concrete. Your child already understands logic. Like, they really understand logic. So this is what I believe across the board for, tech, for money, and for goal character development, my other course. Explicit conversations are exactly what they need. And by that, I mean, so a lot of times, children are always learning through osmosis. They're learning by our tone. They're learning through their friends, like you said. They're learning the culturally, just in their environment. But if we explicitly say no, like in our household, so I'll tell you something we did recently for technology, because I teach a course on AI. Of course, my oldest son has gone and learned at my camp with me. And I'm an advocate. I'm bullish on AI technology for society, but I do think that everyone needs to be aware of, societal impacts and the responsibility that this huge new opportunity has been thrust upon us, kind of. So that's why
Right.
I believe, just like, sex education in the 1950s, there needs to be AI education. And that was not to scare the soldiers coming back from war about all these diseases, but let them know so they can make better choices. That's all I want to do with my AI education. However, it's also, like you said, leading with intention. We have a family crest in our home, and it has our last name and all of the things we love, and a motto and a mission statement.
Oh,
We
wow.
just, yeah, it's great. And it's so great because I told them when they were very young, and it was something that just came out. I told them that our ridiculous Polish last name just means to never give up. Like I said, that's literally the meaning. So I kind of joke, and it says up there, our motto, never give up. And then we have a mission statement. You know, sorry, you can't, because remember, your name literally means you can never give up. So it's this kind of fun thing. And we have it all up in our home, and to redirect them. And it helps me. It's a tool that you can use in the classroom. Like, remember the rules of the class. So it's remember the rules of our home. And so it's a great redirect. Same thing we have done, because I'm, an AI advocate, but I don't want to get that misconstrued, like you're saying. I want to be explicit. So it's going to sound a little future forward and techy, but we have a value statement with technology, and we say, put it up on the wall, we value human relationships over machines. And I know that sounds a little silly right now, but it's very important to have, like you said, leave it intention, but explicit. We need to say, yes, this is a tool. Another theme or another phrase we've coined in our home is co-intelligence, not codependence, right? I
Yeah.
write about this in my book as a strategy. I call it, remember, I was a math major, so forgive me. I call it the R cubed method. So R with a little 3 at the top. Essentially what it is the first R, whenever doing anything academic, is rigor. Rigor, rigor, rigor. Work, search, learn, read, type, write, do the reps with the math. Just do the reps, do the 10 reps, just like a sport. Whenever I teach like a coach. I'm like, let's just coach you through it. All you need is your reps, right? Any mind can learn anything. You just need to get your reps in. So that's the first R, rigor. The second R is research. If at this time you want to engage with some sort of AI tool, use it to research. Don't use it to replace your effort, but use it to research, get some information, right? And the third R is to recap. So have it quiz you and ask you questions. So that's a little elevated. That's if you have, like the 14-year-old and up student. But again, there has been no instruction booklet for how we're going to use this new technology. And so I kind of just developed this on my own for how I want to approach this with my kids. That's what I did with the first course with MoneyWise and Goal Getter. When I was in the classroom, this is kind of interesting. So I was 15 years in the classroom at IBM, and I was a business development executive. And one thing I learned at IBM, which is so great, shout out to all my tech buddies out there, is we had a weekly cadence call. That means once a week, I had to be on a call with all my managers and peers, and I had to commit to the POs I was going to bring for the week. So it was a little bit of a responsibility, and it got some pressure. However, it was the best example of having this weekly cadence of how are you going to perform, and then having others that cared about your performance, you make that commitment to. So flashback, 15 years later, when I'm home and I decide to do a little teaching in the classroom at the local church school, I realize students are coming into the classroom without any clear intentions of performance. They're not coming to me, their managers, because I'm equated to the business world, of what they want, how they want to perform. So I instantly changed that and had each student define their goals when they came into the classroom, how they wanted to perform. And then we would have this weekly cadence of how we're going to get them there. So there's these tiny little things you can do that are proactive that will help your whole family, help you, because you're, again, being in the word coaching keeps you on track, and then it directs them rather than what we've seen, the last 10 years with social media. Social media came upon us and we weren't really ready, but now we have this like 10 years of research of how things would affect it, the neuro differences and hijacking their dopamine systems. So now we know knowledge is power, is what I always say. So let's just take this really proactive approach of how we're going to guide this new technology, right? The second wave of AI, because the truth of the matter is, social media isn't just social media. All of the software and all of the science behind that, that's AI, right? That's AI taking that code and math, writing the algorithm to what you will watch next. That's like
Right.
AI stage one. AI stage two is generative AI. So we have the blueprint of what did not work with social media. So let's just, as parents, work together and create some dynamic, proactive ways we're going to approach it. And, live through the next 10 years with intention and direction.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more, and I think involving the kids early on in those discussions is crucial because I think they want to have some semblance of autonomy and control as they're growing up, but it's like as parents, we also want to really protect them. And I agree with you. And I don't think AI is going to be any different. I think we need to really hone in on how we want our kids to use it. And I love what you're talking about with putting humans first and not letting AI or social media replace that human connection. Because I think as a community and as humans, we're starving for that. A lot of people are really starving for that human connection.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I really want to see kids and business owners and entrepreneurs leaning into using technology and AI as an accelerator, not a replacement. So,
100%. And, just to go back to having these explicit conversations, what I say with my kids, literally in technology, I let them know that if I let them use or abuse technology, their minds will not develop neurotypically. And I have a funny little story in my book. I call it the lazy brain. And I don't always say neurotypically because, that gets lost, but I say, you don't want a lazy brain. And that's the way I kind of dumb it down for them. And then I also say, um, being on technology too much can make you sick and sicken your mind. And, some people might like this or not, but I equate it to cigarettes. I say, you would never ask me for a cigarette because you inherently know that that could make you sick. But this is the
right.
same way, but it can make you sick in your mind. And so I bring this up because we do have power. It's so hard. I know the social influence is difficult. I'm not going to deny it at all, at all 100%. But we do have power. We can make just cases to our children and they can understand it. And I gotta tell you, they'll surprise you. Recently, my sons, I'm bored if they're not on a piece of tech or I don't have a show on, I'm bored. And I just completely reframed it. This is so funny. I have to share it. I said well, that's good. I'm so glad to hear that because being bored is good for you. And so then I'm just ridiculous. They really hate it, kind of roll their eyes. I'm not saying it lands well, but the funniest thing happened. So now they don't even say I'm bored because for the first 10 times I'm bored. I'm like, wonderful. Then I'm a good mom.
Right.
But here's the funny part, just because it's so ridiculous. My middle son came to me and he loves math. And he does love a lot of like the techie stuff. And he goes, Mom, for my birthday, can I have a boredom theme party? Because we had completely reframed boredom to be something that's good. So my whole point is we can direct the ship. I'm not saying they're all going to stick. This is kind of like an elevated, ridiculous, outcome because I just giggled, but we can offer them different ways of seeing things that they can, take on, or at least they'll, roll their eyes at us and be like, oh, boredom. And then they'll redirect themselves organically because they don't want to put up with us. But we do have power in this, and we can provide some different messaging and don't have to feel this suffocating social pressure to comply.
Absolutely. You're doing much better than I am because whenever my kids said they were bored, they got something to clean. So like there's always
Bravo.
there's always something to do, right? It's just it may not be what you naturally want to do, may not
Right.
be exciting and fun, but there's always plenty to do.
Yes.
Um, so going back to the AI and talking to kids about some of that stuff, what do you see as you're interacting with these parents that's one of the biggest fears that parents are having right now as we experience this shift?
Yeah, I just think it's the unknown. And so that's why I talk about the AI workshop. When I was in the classroom, I would ask kids, who here knows what AI is? And every single hand goes up in the room. And then I call on someone, oh, what's AI? And the answer was always a little bit wrong. Right? Oh, robots, an avatar. And I'm like, oh gosh, they don't understand like the infrastructure behind AI. And that's fine because, there's, 10, 14, what have you. And
Most
the number
people
one,
don't.
so here's the number one comment I get from parents when, they're enrolling their kids in my camps is like, I wish I was in this camp. And I really feel for them because I know that feeling myself. And, the truth of the matter is, I have many Bibles, but the Bible I read the most is my kids version, just because it's so palatable and easy. And so that's why I wrote the book, just to make all these things that seem so complex, just pull back the curtain, make it easy and palatable, so you have some general understanding. Because guess what? It's going to take all of us to make this work together, and we want it to serve all of us. And it was built altruistically. OpenAI was built for all of us to use. They were using, the history of AI is so fascinating. They were using something. In my time during IBM, we had something called big data, and we would do data mining. So there's already been this like huge digital data footprint that they were mining, but just companies were mining this data. The tech wasn't really there. The CPU strength wasn't there, but they were mining the data to extract information that was beneficial for their companies. If it's marketing, if it's logistics, it's any sort of efficiencies. Okay. So this is how I kind of like touched on AI, but this is before like the code and algorithms were built. Then 15 years later, we still have all this digital data, but now they're starting to capture the data and they're starting to train models on this data. And now they have the CPU power, right, to really crunch these numbers. So what I think, if people want to start learning about that, I'm happy to teach every parent, because all AI is, it's not magic. It's math, probability and statistics, and code with compute infrastructure, right? It's the CPU. So I always think of it like a car. The big data is the fuel, and the CPUs and the GPUs and the algorithms are the engine. So you put those two together and you can extrapolate a lot of good information. But what's happened now this last 10 or 15 years is they're not just working behind closed doors or for business matters, right? They've opened OpenAI, ChatGPT. They've opened it so society can benefit, so you and I can reap these benefits. And it was actually funded for this altruistic cause. So it comes from this really great foundational idea. It has somewhat shifted, I will say. OpenAI, now there's a profit portion of the business, and now we've seen these pressing demands for resources to support this compute power, but there's also new leaders that are coming up and say, oh, there's something called algorithmic efficiency, so we don't need to have this much scale, this much compute power. My whole point is, I want people to be open to learning. It's not that hard. It's not magic. It's math plus code plus some infrastructure, the compute. And then for them to decide, how are they going to use it? How are they going to benefit from this technology that, again, was opened up to society for us all to benefit? So I encourage to start playing with ChatGPT or generative AI, or even they have some, if people have concerns over resources, they have some models that you can download to your desktop. You don't even have to be online. And another interesting factoid, if you are interested in the power concerns, is 1 hour of streaming television takes up the same power as a quarter hour of using generative AI. So I think just having this wealth of information about how this is affecting all of us is important, because if you are going to start to engage with these tools, know what it's using, right? Knows how it works, but then maybe, like we said, delayed gratification or the opportunity, 1 hour less of streaming. So people need to understand that all these systems work together. But if you don't know that, you're just gonna be like, oh, that's bad for the environment, or, oh, this doesn't correlate over here. So just trying to get as much information out there as I can to people.
I think that's great. And I think you make some really valid and good points. Being in large corporations for years, this data analytics and data mining has been going around for a long time. We've just been trying to figure out how to use it, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So now I think this really opens up the door for people like me and you who can use AI in small business. And that's the goal, right? So it's really hard to compete with some of these larger, more enterprise companies. But now, without the infrastructure cost, without all of this additional set of people, you can build a website in 90 seconds, right? You can do vibe coding. Not, I do not recommend doing that as something that you share with others, but like to get to a prototype, I think it's very valuable.
I agree with that. I just built, so I wanted to build a an anecdotal, dovetail to that. I wanted to build a compound interest calculator for kids because there is a compound interest calculator online, and I use this in my course where we come up with dollar amounts that they're spending. It turns out that the average 11 to 14-year-old in the U.S. spends over $57 at Starbucks. So we take that number, we
Wow.
aggregate it, we a month. We take that number and we aggregate it over 12 months and we put that in the compound interest calculator. And then, they're like 10 years old, 14 years old. So we're throwing this for 30 years and they're making a chunk of money. So, but I wanted to build one that instead of just putting a number, you could populate it with like an icon of like a Starbucks or
Yeah.
a hamburger, whatever. So it would be, the first quote I got to build this thing was like $6,000 for
What?
a developer. Then, to your point, I said, "Oh, why don't I just chat GPT my way to some code?" It literally for the what did you call the prototype? So what I
Yep.
did was I built it all in chat GPT prototype. It doesn't have icons, but it has associated, kid purchases. And then I sent that to a developer half the price. So you're right. If you are open to learn and you retain, never replace your human creativity, because that is where I do not think it ever will replace human creativity. If you retain your human creativity, the world could be your oyster right now, right? So that's why I'm an advocate to have so many people practice, play, participate, because it is your co-intelligence and it takes you to just the next level at the speed of light, it feels like. I mean,
It
so
really
it's
does.
a
Yeah.
fun and exciting time if you're open to it. And then also being aware of, the peripheral stuff. So I'm definitely bullish and excited about this time for society.
I'm with you. And I've talked to a lot of other entrepreneurs, some of this, not to date myself too much, but I think back at the early 2000s, right? Like we have seen what's going on with AI before, like the dot com boom and
Mhm.
other areas. And I think we're there on the cusp of
Mhm.
the exact same thing that we went through in the early 2000s and then again around 2010. All of
Mhm.
this great technology and things that are coming out, once it evolves and gets just a little bit more mature, we're going to see a lot of these small businesses that are starting to get acquired by the bigger players. We're going to see
Mhm.
a lot of these, a lot of this intellectual property, things, ways that people think about things is what
Mhm.
these companies are really going to want because that's what drives how we interact in the space. That's
Mhm.
how it drives what's affordable. A lot of these tools were free starting out and now it's pay to play. So I think the more we learn, the more we understand how this stuff works, the better off we'll be in business and just in operating in life in general, right? Like I know we all have parents, or we're now becoming those parents who are like, what the hell just happened to my phone? Can you fix this, please? So we're trying to stay on top of it so that we can still function and be relevant in a lot of what's going on today and in the conversations that are happening.
Mhm. And I will say when you combine the two, like the fintech and the money, so that's a new thing altogether where our children aren't having that transactional experience. I never have cash anymore. I don't know about you. They're not getting their allowance through cash. It's through a screen, and or
Right.
they're paying with some sort of fintech where they don't never even see the tax because it's just a number on a balance sheet. So that is something that you still need to have these conversations, because you're not see, touching, feeling it, doesn't mean that financial exchange hasn't gone. So that's why I'm an advocate for parents being that, primary teacher for their kids on money and on tech, and of course on character, because we're already doing that anyways, raising
Right.
kids.
Well, and if we don't, someone else will, right?
Well,
So
that's
that
the thing. And I never saw a student come out and say, I want to be courageous, right? Just for the sake of having courage. Actually, there's a lot more wallflowers in my experience in the classroom. So it's just introducing these concepts of who they might want to be. So it's a really kind of fun time. And I tell my son, just to finish up on the AI concept, my oldest son, this is the most exciting time in history. I think, being around 250 years ago with the start of America, that must have been really exciting, because they're like writing the blueprint for government and society. But now I feel my perspective is rose rim glasses. It's reimagine. Now we have some great, foundation. But now it's like it's just such an evolution. Like, we get to just reimagine what we want it to look like. And it's very, very exciting. And I really think this is important for us as parents to share this vision so they can contribute. And I put this in almost every single one of my instructional videos. It's really your time. These are the systems that are in place today. This is a financial system, but look how much it's evolved in the last 200 years. This is our government system. Look how much it's evolved over the last, 250 years. Now, you get to actively participate in where you want it to go. So let's learn a little bit of foundational understanding. And then, what if you want to do this here? What do you want? And for instance, we always have a fun, playful ride home from school. And my son, I go, come up with an idea how we can, carbon capture idea. And he goes, oh, what if there was a asphalt sealant that you could spray on the ground that worked just like biomimicry, like a leaf, where it could carbon capture, and like, brilliant. And honestly, today, in this day and age, we can throw that into ChatGPT and just try to explore what is the concrete science, if that is even plausible. But nothing's off the table. So it's time for us all to just start reimagining what's possible. And look, we have this incredible superhero next to us trying to help us get there too, and be the leaders for that next generation.
I love it. I couldn't agree more. And I can't wait to see where we're headed, right? I truly believe that we are on the cusp, that it is a super exciting time because things change so rapidly, and we have so much technology and so much support, and things that people are imagining are coming to fruition. So I can't wait to see what it looks like another 10 or 15 years from now.
I know. Exciting times.
Absolutely. Well, it's been awesome having you on. Before we wrap up, one final question that I have for you. I know, starting out in the tech space and being a mom and all that, I would love to know, what's one secret you wish you would have known starting out as an entrepreneur?
Oh, that's such a good one. And I think I wrote this down. So one thing, and this, one thing I want people to never forget, like, your ambition and your idea and your drive and even your foundational understanding, all of those things are important. But what I think is equally as important, if you want to start your own business, you want to be an entrepreneur, are two things. Number one is you will always need a source of capital, right? You will always have to
Absolutely.
either be asking people for money, have your own money, or be resourcing money, have some income stream. So access to capital, and really thinking through that is important. And the second part is connection in my life. So for my business, I had some access to capital. I had to go and raise some capital, and I had to borrow some capital, right? So that's my capital story. But also connections, being open to all connections and connecting with people will always, in my tech career, I can't say it enough, every single time, I met the right person, doors will swing open. So put yourself out there as a young entrepreneur, someone just starting out, like, find your resources for capital and just continue to knock on every door, because here's the other thing. The door that you knock on that you think is going to answer you won't answer you. But the most unexpected connection will be the catalyst to growth. So you just have to cast a wide net and get out there, because it will surprise you. The path, you may not have derived your own path, but the path will be there, and it'll be unexpected. And that's what makes it so fun.
That's awesome. I couldn't agree more. It is definitely fun, and it's been great talking to you today. So, if our listeners want to learn more about what you're working on or connect with you, what's the best way for them to reach out?
Of course, you can always go to my website, kidlaboratories.com. I also am on Instagram at Kid Laboratories. I'd love to hear from anybody who's listened to the podcast. I've got a bunch of resources for parents out there. Future Proof Kids, the book and workbook series, will be launched next March 2026 if you want to teach these topics to your kids at home.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Elena. I really appreciate having you on. And thank you to everybody for listening to C-Suite Secrets. If you have found today's conversation as valuable as I have, be sure to hit that like and follow button and share it with somebody who's building a business. If you want more tips on how to grow your business between episodes, you can find me on Instagram at Heather Parsons Official, and you can join us on Facebook at C-Suite Insiders. Until next time, remember to keep growing, and you don't have to do this alone.